into the online broadcast network, AfterBuzz TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AfterBuzz TV, the destination for TV superfans, producing after-shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Hello and welcome to an all-new UFC AfterBuzz TV. My name is Daria Berenato, and I'm here with a new panel today. Mr. J-Tan, as always, and guest Mr. Michael Bell. He is referee and judge of MMA all over, mostly in California, though, right?
Pretty much in California, but yeah, a few other states besides California.
Yeah, he's actually been a referee to quite a few UFC matches, right?
Judged 5 UFC events, refed and judged probably 5 or 6 Bellator events, refed a World Series of Fighting, and California has more fight shows than any state in the country. You know, you could probably add most of the Midwest, all their fight shows, and it still wouldn't meet up to what California puts together. So we're definitely the fight state in the United States for sure.
So you're definitely in the right place to get work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most people know, of course, the Big Johns and Herb Deans of the world. Mm-hmm. Mike, I'd say, is possibly one of the leading guys of what I'm going to call the second generation of refs. There's a new, of course, there's always new guys debuting and gaining experience on the local fight scene. But Mike is one of Big John's preeminent proteges, really. Went through Big John's command program for refereeing and officiating, and has really led the way. And over the past couple of years, has made his name, at least in the California circles, certainly as one of the more reputable judges and refs. And I should say that actually, you're known more for refereeing than judging, because you'll get on camera on those moments. I've seen you also in World Series of Fighting and a couple of shows on Access TV. But yeah, Mike is one of those ones that's kind of leading the way for the next generation of refs.
Absolutely. What was the most recent UFC fight that you judged?
The most recent UFC fight was in August. It was the TJ Dillashaw versus, it was supposed to be Renan Barão. And then, of course, he had his incident with his weight cut, so Soto stepped in.
Right.
Joe Soto.
Yeah. And
it's 178, I believe, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Is that a fun one to judge?
You know what? For as Joe Soto, you have nothing to lose. You get the fight on a day's notice.
Right.
And, if you lose, you lose. If you win, you beat the champ. What does he have to lose? So he goes on there and he fights his heart out. And obviously Dillashaw won and Dillashaw controlled, but Joe Soto, came in there with all the intents of winning, and it was a fun show that ended up being a fun show when all the things that led up to it, were probably not what the UFC wanted.
But at least
Right.
they got a main event and a decent one for it. It wasn't like a quick flash finish or anything like that. Yeah.
No, he definitely hung in there.
Yeah.
We're going to get more to your story later on. We're going to talk about whether he has the best or the worst seat in the house. But first, let's dive into the main event. It was UFC Fight Night 57 in Austin, Texas. Edgar versus Swanson. Let's start at the bottom of the main card here. We had Matt Wiman versus Isaac Vallie-Flagg. Unanimous decision win for Matt Wiman. Then we had Joseph Benevidez versus Dustin Ortiz. Joey B won
Unanimous decision
as well.
Yeah.
Then we had Chico Rosholt versus Oleksiy, the boa constrictor. Oliynyk.
That's what my guess is, I think.
That's what we're going to go with. Oliynyk won. Is that unanimous? No, it was a left hook.
It was a KO. KO in the first. That was when the two heavyweights came out and full force and were just swinging away. That was actually quite a fun one. I mean, it's interesting because this was a show that when you look on, you can finish up the results, but quite a lot of bang for your buck in some
Absolutely.
ways.
There was a lot of decision victories, but
Yeah,
like you said, nonetheless, they were entertaining. Very entertaining.
Yeah.
Then we had Brad Pickett versus Chico Camus. Chico Camus won via, I didn't write down the
Split
results.
decision.
Split decision.
29-28. No, I'm sorry. It was 30-27, 29-28, and then 28-29, I believe.
Okay. And then Bobby King Green versus Edson Barboza. Probably one of my favorite matches on the main card. Edson Barboza won 30-27.
Unanimous
decision. And then Frankie, the answer Edgar versus Cub Swanson. Definitely delivered for a main event. It was Frankie Edgar with a finish 4 minutes and 56 seconds into the 5th round, guys. It set a record. It was a rear naked choke finish, first of all, but it set a record. It wasn't the closest finish to the bell, but it was the closest finish to the bell in the 5th round of a fight.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, the latest stoppage, I believe, technically, for speaking about rounds. If we're including, the number of rounds in that criteria, closest to the bell or closest to the closest finish to the end of a fight, I guess you could say.
Right.
Or latest. Latest is the phrase that they used because it was round 5 as opposed to round 3 or so.
Round 3, right.
Yeah. Yeah, like I was saying, it's one of those matches or one of those cards where, I mean, there's a lot of really compelling, great rounds. I think that's probably the best way to phrase it. There's a lot of great rounds on this show. You're going to be in front of your TV for quite a while, but it was you get bang for your buck, and especially because it was free. That doesn't hurt either. But you're going to be, it's worth looking for the replay because there's a lot of decisions, but and then quite a few of them are actually pretty close. I had some debate. At least in the the prelim matches, I had two that I think didn't go the way that I scored it, and then the split decision with One Punch and Chico the King there, which it was pretty straightforward to me. I didn't really think it was much of a split, but
I didn't either.
You at least had some good compelling drama up to the end, and everyone really left it in the cage in there. Even the heavyweights, that first round knockout, Jared Rosholt was really taking it to him, came out swinging hard and was controlling Oleksiy, for a good part of the beginning of the round. But then Oleksiy was able to break off and in the middle of the cage landed a right-left combo that just dropped him and followed up with punches.
That
to the
being
finish.
said, I think it was maybe the most entertaining Rosholt that we've ever seen up to this point.
I'd say that, yeah.
We were remembering back to his fight versus Saul Paleli, and not that it was bad, but it wasn't as aggressive as we saw Rosholt in this fight. So
he was like a rhino today.
He was, and
force on.
It's that thing with heavyweights. Any punch could be the last punch. So I don't think that say it had went to decision. Rosholt was doing good. What did you think of that fight?
Oh, yeah, Rosholt came out super aggressive, throwing punches, knees, and had Oleksiy on the defensive pretty much the whole fight until he throws that combo.
Right.
And like I said, the right landed, but then the left was the one that just took him out and knocked him out completely face first.
Just goes to show you anything can happen in the sport at any
moment. It really can.
Yeah.
Do you like being in there with those heavyweights, or?
You know what? To me, actually, heavyweights are the easiest ones to referee.
Really?
You have typically heavyweights, either the fight ends quickly or it becomes a long fight where they labor and they gas and they move super slowly.
In which case, you don't have to worry about being on your toes, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's like, this is an easy shift.
People, the aesthetic appearance of a smaller referee with big fighters, they think, oh, he's too small. He's not going to be able to control the fighters. I mean, if you're a good referee and you explain backstage what the rules are, what you look for, what you're not going to allow. And as long as you establish that backstage, most fighters are going to respect that, especially professional fighters. This is their job. If they don't, especially in the professional level, you can earn a suspension. And if you're suspended, you can't fight. You can't earn a living.
Right.
And let's be honest, the pay for most fighters is paycheck to paycheck when it comes to fights.
Absolutely.
So
it's important to keep the honor and integrity of the whole process, especially officiating. I mean, if they're not going to listen to the ref, who are they going to listen to?
Yeah, and I mean, for the most part, they've all come up with martial art backgrounds. Most fighters in general are respectful.
Yeah.
They of course they're going to compete hard, but afterwards, that's a great thing about our sport. After the fight's over, they show respect, they shake hands, they hug. You would, as aggressive as our sport is, it's probably some of the best sportsmanship that you'll see after most fights.
I agree. Martial arts just gives you that discipline, especially when you start from a young age. Like Bobby Green and Edson Barboza, I think they were praying after the fight together. They were on their knees and had a moment there. So
And that was one where we saw in that match, Bobby seemed to be playing a lot of mind games. And
the trash talk, the banter back and forth.
Yeah,
so.
as is his style. You know what else? Too, a similar incident to this. Matt Wiman and Isaac Vallie-Flagg. Apparently, a little bit of storyline to this one.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Wyman. I heard Wyman in the. I believe it was the post-fight press conference. He was explaining because there was some bad blood and tension, at least at weigh-ins and going into the match. Apparently, there was some kind of misunderstanding. Wyman had overheard something that Isaac Vallie-Flagg had said, or thought that he had said rather, which he took personally and brought into the cage. And certainly after, as we saw. Right after the third round bell, when the match was over, they were still kind of popping off at each other. It looked like there, and then towards the end, afterwards, and you come back from commercial, and after the announcement, they're shaking hands and talking to each other. So apparently there was some kind of misunderstanding that led to some nice, heat and great, subsequently great action in the match itself that ended up getting squashed by the end anyway.
Right. Have you ever been in there and the two fighters just had a lot of emotional tension during the fight?
Oh yeah, there's even in the local scene, there's a few fighters that maybe it's a rematch and there's a little bit of rivalry and there's some build up and trash talk.
Right.
And part of it is hyping the fight, but sometimes everybody's got feelings and feelings get rubbed the wrong way and the emotions come out. Maybe someone gets the finish and wins and then rubs it in to the fighter, and then you've got to be the separator as far as the referee, long as the referee too. It's not often, but it does happen.
Right. How is it being in there with that? Is it hard to deal with, or?
If you let it become hard to deal with. Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
That sounds like a Big John answer, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
it does, doesn't it?
John's got a much more menacing appearance, and when he speaks, it's like most fighters are just like, okay, I understand.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm never gonna say that I've got that presence that John has, but at the same token, John teaches every ref that this is your cage, and you have to establish that you are in charge of that cage. As a referee, it's not a bully tactic or anything, but you have to know that there's the line in the sand and the rules are there, and you're going to enforce them.
Absolutely,
You're the
it's for
authority.
safety in general. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about the about going through the process. Now, and I should say as well, I was thinking, you've done a lot of RU of MMA shows as well, probably since the beginning, I would think. But from working on these little shows, going through John's system, which is very very intense and what's the word I'm looking for?
Precise,
yeah, and very hard to get through. To working on local shows and then building your way up to larger shows. How does that whole process go?
Well, John, I believe, had his very first officials class in 2007. It was a referee and judges one put together. And I think there was 20 of us that signed up, and only 3 of us passed, and I was one of them. Mm-hmm. But back in 2007, we didn't have amateur MMA, and to get a pro license without ever having doing a fight,
Sure.
unless unless you've got friends that are helping you along the way, that's not going to happen. But nor it shouldn't. But once Camo came around in 2009.
California State Amateur MMA
organization. I ran into JT Steele, told him that I would be interested in participating with Camo, that I had taken John's course and had passed it, and he talked to John and confirmed it, and had me start off as an inspector. Those are the guys that check the hand wraps and
The ones in the cage with the fighter.
yeah, in between rounds that are observing the fighter and walking the fighter to the cage. So I started from there, and then started judging some fights, and then actually took John's course again because John had advanced his course to give much more detail to being a referee and actually some more cage work. So I took it again, and I passed it again, and then started refereeing for Camo in 2010, late 2010, 2011. And just any show I could get on, even if I wasn't assigned as the referee, I just volunteer myself and ask, hey, can I get a few fights in? The same when guys were sparring at the gym. It's just like, hey, do you mind if I come and work a few rounds with you and referee? And most fighters are going to be like, yeah, that's great.
You really just kind of stick yourself out there and input yourself in the community and make your face and your presence and name known. Is that fair? And it starts to snowball from there?
That's a fair assessment. And at the same token, experience is the best tool that anybody can get. And the more that you get in there, the movement of walking as a referee, understanding certain positions, understanding certain fouls and where they're most likely to happen, that you don't really have in a fast fight time to think and analyze and break down. It's got to be a reaction. It's got to be instant a lot of times in decision making. Indecision looks bad in our profession. So the more that you practice it and are able to instantly react and make the correct decision, the better you look as an official.
Wow. A lot of pressure goes into judging and refereeing in our sport. Would you say that you prefer to ref or judge a fight?
I prefer to ref.
Really? Is it because that lack of pressure, a little less pressure maybe?
There's pressure. There's actually a lot of pressure in judging. There are some close rounds where like you could argue.
Absolutely.
Hey, you know what? Red corner did some damage, but blue corner really did something effective in this round, and it's like, oh man, it's a toss-up. And
you don't get to sit there with an instant replay or talk about it after the match.
After that bell or horn rings, the other, especially in the big shows, the other ref is right behind you to pick up your scorecard, so you don't really have time to think about it. You have to make that decision,
right?
And as a judge, anybody can write an even score, a 10-10 score. You rarely see that score.
Right.
It's your job to pick a winner of that round. So you have to be able, and in a 5-minute round, break down everything. Sometimes there's a lot of going on, grappling, striking, different things, and decide who's the winner of that round.
Right.
And like Jay said, you don't have instant replay where you can, I wonder if he really connected with that punch. You have to make a decision.
Right. A job I would never want. We had Big John in a couple months ago, and we talked to him about, the scoring system and where MMA is now in terms of judging and refereeing. And he, of course, has his complaints, as a lot of people do in the MMA world. I'm wondering where you think it is, and do you see it changing in the near future, and what would you like to see change?
As far as the scoring, definitely, our fights are 3 rounds and 5 rounds. That's 3 rounds. One round can determine who wins and who loses.
Right.
In boxing, you have usually like around 10 rounds, 12 rounds for the big serious fights. So if a guy's clearly winning most of the fight, most of the times, they're gonna be the deserved winner. But in a close round in MMA, and maybe one round goes to the other person and one round goes to the other fighter. But that close round, which is hard to decipher, and maybe it's not as wide of a margin as maybe a clear and decisive round.
Right.
But yet a fight like maybe a George St. Pierre versus Johnny Hendricks is a good example.
Right.
You could say St. Pierre won his rounds, and when he won his rounds, a close margin. But the rounds that Hendricks won 2 and 4 were decisive, overwhelming, like it was clear cut. He won that round and won it by a large margin. That's probably where we're evolving to in the sport, is crediting large margins versus short margins.
Right.
And we're using the 10-8 round more often is probably where we're going as far as scoring MMA fights. There's been a lot of fights, and maybe it's only 5% of those fights, of the total fights, but certain fights where a fighter does much more effective techniques, whether it's striking or grappling, but gets a 10-9 score, whereas maybe the other person just got a takedown and just held and got a 10-9 score.
Right.
There's, of course, several fights, maybe like Machida versus Quentin Jackson, maybe even BJ Penn versus George St. Pierre 1. There's fights where one round was clearly one-sided decided, maybe Vera versus Couture. And I've been a victim of it myself. We're so used to scoring 10-9. 90, I'd venture to say 99% of all our rounds are scored 10-9. And there's some decisive wide 10-9s and there's some short 10-9s. Giving more credit for winning a round by a large margin, especially when the other fighter is doing nothing offensive.
You would make that a 10-8, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
So the idea being 10-8s become more frequent. They become what we would all assume right now is a 10-9. But in the close ones, where we say, ooh, that could go either way, 10-9.
That's the 10-9.
That becomes a 10-9.
If someone wins by a significant margin,
that should be a 10-8?
They should be given credit for that round. If they're in control of the whole round, maybe they're landing strikes, but they're not finishing the opponent. But the other, their opponent is doing nothing offensive. Like the fight we just watched right now, like Cub versus Frankie Edgar. Like look at rounds 4 and round 5. What was Swanson doing those last rounds offensively? He was on his back the whole time. He was taking damage. He was getting dominant. That's an example there of, Frankie should deserve a 10-8 round for that.
Right.
He was in complete control. Cub did nothing offensive the whole time. He was defending the whole time.
Yeah.
And we don't score defense. Defense is in itself. You're staying in the fight.
Right. So that
Very
should
good
not
point.
necessarily earn anything.
Yeah.
Which means that Frankie should get that much more credit for it.
And if it was a 3-round fight and maybe that was the last round and maybe 1 and 2 were both kind of close, or maybe both rounds were, it was just, for example, let's say, Cub won the first 2 rounds by a close margin, but, then Frankie has a round like that to finish the fight. He should get credit for that.
They can't all. I understand what you're saying. They can't all be 10-9s. When you look at Frankie Edgar's rounds and you're like, oh, he wiped him clean, and then you look at Cub Swanson's rounds and go, Cub won it by this much, and then you look at the scorecards, 10-9, 10-9, 10-9, 10-9. You know what I mean? And it's a very close fight on paper, but to the viewers watching it, it's a clean slate. So I think that.
Not all 10-9s are built alike, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
That's a very good point.
Absolutely.
Do you think that if you were to establish a new point system going towards what you're saying, do you think the fans would understand it more, or do you think it would become more complex for a fan to see it how the judges do?
Well, the 10-point must system was transitioned from boxing.
Right.
It's a lot easier to score in boxing because if you get a knockdown, that's an automatic point that gets subtracted.
And it's just punching.
Yeah.
You're not looking at all the other aspects of the sport.
So like when someone gets dropped in boxing, all the judges pretty much score it 10-8, as long as they don't drop their opponent back. But it's pretty unanimous. I believe the statistics like 80 to 90%, all judges agree on that. In MMA, it's very rare. It happens maybe like 5%, if that.
Right.
It's much more subjective. So it is difficult to establish a concrete criteria. It is subjective, and it does come to the experience of the judges to understand what's a close margin and what's a wide margin, and what's the level or threshold of a wide margin where it ventures into the 10-8 realm. The basic thing I could give you is, if someone's in control of that round and winning by a large margin, if Joe Joe fan at the house is saying, "Wow, this guy is dominating this round. He's not finishing the fight. The fight's still going on, but he dominates the round. He should get credit for that as a 10-8."
Right.
It's a really tough thing, I would think, for us to get over the hump. This mentality, a new way of looking at the judging criteria. And it's a tough thing to get over to casual fans that, one, already think they know the sport. Two, having to kind of motivate them to open their mind up to think differently, and maybe even force them to think in a more educated way than that they do now. When people are so used to saying, this is a 10-9, 10-9, 10-9. This sport is easy. I understand it completely. No, Pinhead. That's a 10-8. 10-9 is going to be something you'd see in a Diego Sanchez versus Gil Melendez kind of thing, or back and forth, either way.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's subjective. At the same token, there's so many variables in MMA as far as scoring, where I'm not saying that any fans uneducated, that's not the case, but there's a lot of things to look at. At the same token, scoring in MMA goes to, how can I say it's subjective, and I lost my train of thought here, but
it's all right. It's a tough thing, especially given how many different disciplines there are.
Yeah.
But between takedowns and jiu-jitsu, I mean, what do you think is the trick to educating the fans, or training new referees, or rather judges, to understand fully the three dimensions of MMA? How do you get that over with them?
Well, our top two criteria are effective striking and effective grappling. Effective grappling, or effective striking, for most people, they can see the results.
Right.
The punches.
Especially if it's on the guy's face.
Yeah, if it's on the face. Effective grappling, for some people, they think that being on top is effective grappling, maybe in a close guard. And for those that understand, just because the guy's on top, but if the guy on the bottom is going for submissions or is attacking, maybe doing the better strikes. We talked about the Tony Ferguson, Danny Castillo fight. Even though Castillo's on top, Ferguson is the one that's being aggressive. He's the one that's dictating the fight. He's the one that's going for finishes or submissions or strikes.
Right.
And that speaks to his control and aggression in the match, as well as technique, because he's going for it, right?
He's going for it, and he's doing the damage. He's doing the effective strikes from the bottom. He's going for submissions, and in certain points, forcing Danny to fight his fight.
As opposed to Danny controlling how the fight goes.
Whereas when Edgar and Swanson, and Edgar is on top, Edgar is throwing strikes. Edgar is going from half guard, trying to pass. He does pass in the later rounds to mount. Sometimes he just actually stays in half guard and triangles his legs because he knows that's a very controlling position, and he can throw strikes there, and it's much harder for Cub to defend.
And it was. I mean, Cub Swanson is a high-level black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he stayed on the bottom for majority of those rounds and was getting just beat to death by Frankie Edgar from half guard. He eventually moved to mount, but that wasn't until the later rounds.
Yeah.
I think another thing with judging and reffing, you guys have those cage side, ring side seats, and a lot of the time you can see, okay, that strike hit him flush on the face, or that takedown was amazing, whatever it is. But when you're sitting in the stands or you're watching from a TV, what to you guys is maybe an inaccurate flurry of 30 or 40 punches with a couple landing on the TV could look like, oh my God, Frankie Edgar just hit Cub Swanson with 30 amazing punches, and you're in the cage going, only about 2 of those hit. So I think that's another thing that may be hard for the casual fan or someone sitting from a distance is able to see.
It's a very different view when you're that much closer, right?
Well, there's pros and cons to it. with any combat sport, for most part, there's 3 judges and they're in 3 different sides. At the UFC does supply TVs for their judges to look at. Most promotions don't. So you do get to feel, you can hear and feel the impact of strikes versus maybe on TV you don't necessarily see how effective they are or the impact, you don't hear it. There are some cons as well too. Sometimes the angle where you're sitting at and where your seat is aligned. The octagon is a 8-sided cage, and if for the judges of the UFC, there's one real good judge's chair, and then there's other one that's lined up with either like the cage door or poles. So there are some times where you have some little blind spots. Luckily, they have the TV there to help out. But the same thing with Bellator. There's times where you have to lean on your seat to peek around to see if the fight's going on. And plus, they're 30 foot size cages.
Right.
So if the fight is ground and pounding on the other side of the cage, and the guy that's doing the ground and pounds back to you, it's sometimes hard to see if the punches are landing.
You're stuck in that position.
Whereas
on TV, you get to watch it, and you're always getting the best angle.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so sometimes that's why, and I'm not trying to defend any judge, but if one judge has a certain score, maybe that's different from the other judges, maybe on a certain round, and something like that happens. It
could be because of his view.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think that our sport is still so new, and there's still so many things that have yet to be perfected. I mean, other sports that we watch on television have been around for centuries. So I think that MMA, might get to a point where we perfected the judges' seats or something like that to really make it a fair playing game, or improved the scoring system, or changed the 10-point must system and stuff like that. Do you see it as a constant evolving sport that will get to a point where maybe things are more clear cut?
Well, I think anytime you have subjective thinking, there's always going to be opinion. So
right.
I mean that it's probably always going to happen when it comes to judges' decisions. But as far as evolving as a sport, I'm all for it. It should be encouraged. If you look at the big pro sports like the NFL or the NBA or NHL, the NFL is a great example. Every year they have new rules that they bring out. Some good, some bad, but they're always looking to better the process and put out a better product for their fans.
I just had an idea. This is what we'll do. This is the step that I think we should go, because technology is playing a big part of the evolution of our sport. Instant replay.
Tell the world, Jay.
Well, here's the plan. Okay, for better judging, what I think we will end up doing is probably we will still have the 3 judges. They will actually wear helmets covering their eyes and have maybe even no loudspeaker or nothing, so they don't have to hear. It'll be ambient sound pumped into their ears, so they don't have to hear the crowd. They're not influenced by it. But what are they seeing in the headphones here, or in the helmet? They're seeing
fight.
nothing but the fight. Exactly, the
That
feed.
is genius.
So you can cut to different little angles, right? So you can always get the best angle based on the TV feed, right? And so it's completely unbiased. And on top of that, if you think about it, you watch a good sci-fi movie, and like there's those situations where somebody is being judged, maybe it's sports or in like some giant futuristic court of law. What do you always see? The judges there are like in these like robes. They're straight up they're serious, not giving any expression or anything like that, and they've got some kind of weird ass headpiece or gear on that. That's the money shot right there. That is it. It's helmets. Helmets are the thing that's going to improve MMA judging.
That's like saying you should wear masks to play poker. It takes away
But it's
from
allowed.
part of it.
Oh, that pisses me off too, quite frankly. When you see the guys with headphones like us and a hoodie and sunglasses, they're allowed to play poker in the World Series. I was like, who let the Unabomber to the table? What's that about? I never understood that. No, you should strip that away. But again, there's a difference, because that guy is a player. He's involved in it, and there's no judging in poker. You either have your hand or you don't,
Right.
But these are the judges. These are the objective
or
opinion.
Or if you're gonna go really futuristic and bring up sci-fi, maybe they'll have little like rotating seats that like, you know, can float and they can go.
Oh, and so you see judges spinning all around this cage.
Helicopter them, or like, you know, take them above the cage, go down, and they can go around the cage on maybe like a little track.
Right. And this will be finally the time that we can actually start to implement Art Davies' original idea about the moats and the piranha.
Oh, that's true.
Electrical fence.
And the barbed wire on the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those rotating seats would be, you know, oblivious to all of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, they have it on The Voice. You push a button, the chair turns around.
Really? Like
America?
I watch The Voice. Are you kidding me?
Hello?
I got to cover a minimum of 5 hours of MMA per weekend. I'm watching The Voice.
Blake Shelton pushes a button when he likes a singer's voice, and the chair whips around. And it shows him. That's why it's called The Voice, because you can't see who's singing. Your back is to them. It's, you know, all the judges.
Do you know about this?
I've seen that part, but
okay.
I haven't watched
See, at least you knew that.
Yeah.
It's Adam Levine and Blake Shelton, and they're sitting, their backs facing the singer.
I didn't know that they didn't watch the singer as the singer.
Yeah, and they're listening to the voice, and if they like it, based on just the voice alone, they hit their button, and it turns them around, and they're either pleasantly surprised with what they look like, or...
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
They're always happy, right, guys? So they do have that technology to make chairs move in circles. So now all they have to do is put it on a train track, like, you know, you put it on your Christmas tree.
We're just one step ahead from that.
'Tis the season.
Or one step behind.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if they can't make the chairs float, which would be awesome, then they could just put them on little, you know, tracks going up.
Yeah, kind of like the skyscraper, that slingshot thing in Vegas. Yeah, just a giant pole for them to go up and down.
Yes. Or like the drop rides.
What do you think, man? Are you afraid of heights?
I'm not afraid of heights.
Okay.
I've skydived before, but...
Strap up, buddy.
I don't know if I want my judges sheet going all around.
It's like, oh no, I just went all the way up here, and now the fight's over there.
Yeah.
Down, over.
Yeah.
They'd have to make the hydraulics on that thing.
This is like a mix of Tron and Star Wars here.
I like it.
Me too.
With Star Wars, it should just be a hologram. You have like
there you
little
go.
nano machines flying around. They're recording the fight, and then the judges can just be stationary and move the hologram around to see the best positions. Even like turning it to be like they're on the position of the guy who's on the bottom.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just reinvented MMA. Thanks a lot. Great for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, J-Tam. Okay, wait. I want to. Did you see the prelims or no?
I didn't see the prelims.
Okay, if you guys didn't see the prelims either, go check them out on Fight Pass for just $9.99 a month.
Specifically, the Fight Pass prelims you're talking about, right?
Yes.
The prelims will be replayed on Fox Sports 2 this week.
Right, but the two Fight Pass prelims, Juan Pugh versus Doohoo Choi and Paige Van Zant versus Kaylin Curran, both really exciting fights. The first one, Juan Pugh versus Doohoo Choi, ended super quick in the first round.
Yeah.
A wicked overhand right by Doohoo Choi, ending it early. But then Paige Van Zant versus Kaylin Curran. Now, these are two strawweight contenders. As you guys know, we do our Wednesday show of The Ultimate Fighter, which is the strawweight season going on right now. These two women were not on the season. Paige Van Zant, because of her age, she's only 20 years old.
Wasn't able to get into the house.
Right, because there's alcohol in the house, which she cannot consume legally. And then Kaylin Curran just wasn't on the house for whatever reason. She's a Hawaiian native.
It was one match of the night. Let's just say it. Fight of the night for them.
Brawled it out for 3 rounds.
Yeah.
And Paige Van Zant finished it with an amazing TKO finish on the ground there in round 3.
Yeah, Paige really brought it. There was a lot of hype behind her coming into this match, and she delivered, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, going into the match, all I knew is that Kaylin Curran had a wrestling background and that Paige Van Zant was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. You know, that told me, based off of paper and statistics, that, okay, maybe Paige is going to keep it on the feet, you know, and Kaylin Curran's going to be wrestling her to the ground, maybe some clinch work against the cage. That was not the case. Paige Van Zant looked amazing against the cage. 90% of the fight was against the cage, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of clinch work against the cage. However, it was exciting clinch work against the cage. Paige did an excellent job doing dirty boxing, and we could dare say dirty Muay Thai. She was landing knees to the head in the clinch. some elbows
brutal
and
knees.
Uppercuts and stuff. Yeah, really doing great. And then for her credit, Kaylin, challenged and got some nice trip takedowns as well off the cage. But then Paige would get on top.
Very scrappy fighter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a low weight class, but
they were fast.
They were quick.
But they were dogged, and they did not let go of each other for most of the match.
No.
Really, definitely worth going out of your way to find this one, and especially with, I think we'll see a lot from Kaylin in the future, but also Paige Van Zandt is going to be a name to talk about, in just a few weeks once Ultimate Fighter 20 is done, and these girls are now fully just straightforward UFC fighters.
Right.
She's going to be in the mix in that
I'm so
top 10
curious
there.
to see where the girls that weren't on the house and the girls that are on the house mix in with each other, because it's kind of like you have them in two different worlds. Like we were saying, the performance that Paige Van Zandt put on was, everything on the line, super entertaining, putting it all out there. Whereas sometimes when you're in the Ultimate Fighter house, for some reason or another, you kind of reserve for that big fight, and the fights in the house don't always, they're not all KO finishes or submission victories like we've seen this season. A lot of decisions, but so I'm excited to see them mix in. We were talking about Rose Namajunas versus Paige Van Zandt would be like the ultimate match.
That'd be a dogfight for sure.
That would be so much fun to watch. But I'm excited to see in the coming weeks where the rankings go with these girls.
Yeah, the other two performance bonuses, or the performance bonuses of the night, went to Frankie Edgar, of course, for quite a one-handed, a dominating performance, and Oleksiy Oliynyk for finishing Jared Rosholt in that first round. That brutal KO that we were talking about. What did you guys think? I'm curious for us to talk about some of the other ones. We saw quite a few decisions. It's funny, Bobby Green versus Edson Barboza in the co-main event. I've watched the show twice now. Yesterday I was at a buddy's place, and mental note to myself: try not to watch MMA events or judge them, rather take notes on them, amidst two dogs, an infant child, and a couple of buddies chatting it up, one of whom has nothing, no interest in MMA, so his mental head is head's over here. Yeah, because I gave that to Bobby Green, and then watching it more focused today, it really was Edson Barboza's night there.
Was there alcohol involved, Jay?
Actually, believe it or not, there was not. There was not alcohol involved in watching this show.
I think I know what it was.
I tend to do a bit better, actually, when I'm at a bar watching alcohol, because I just tune out all the Weekend Warrior sports fan, and I'm just watching,
Right.
So.
Well, I think I know what it was. You also watched Metamoris, Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, the Pacquiao fight.
You watched about 9 or 10 hours of martial arts of some sort yesterday.
You had a fight overdose.
Yeah,
I
my
think
head
that's what
was
it
a little
was.
bit dizzy.
Yeah.
But this was the middle chunk. So, Metamoris was fine. That's an excellent show unto itself. If you really want, guys, if you want to appreciate or learn to appreciate the real tactical stuff of ground fighting and submissions and grappling, do yourself a favor and check out Metamoris. Rory McDonald of the UFC had a fight there. Excellent show.
And a couple others, I think, from the UFC.
The Sakuraba and Hoist Gracie.
Oh.
Talk about I'm sorry, not Hoist.
It was Henzo.
Henzo.
Pardon me. My bad. But to see a legend like Kazushi Sakuraba, live in this day and age, lot of fun. It's kind of, I'd call it like the tennis of combat sports, but I mean that with all respect and in the good way. But
I think it's an important thing for martial arts fans of any sort to watch, especially if you like MMA, because it'll really help you understand when the fight goes to the ground. We have a lot of misunderstandings to this day, I think, with ground game, because it's always evolving.
Right.
We have so many different types. I mean, you have the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which is forever evolving, and then you have, Eddie Bravo
Planet.
with his
Yeah.
10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, that a lot of people, even, referees and judges, I think, have a hard time deciphering his moves because he's constantly making up new ones. Would you agree?
You definitely have to understand the techniques of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu to understand where a fighter on the bottom who's got mission control or rubber guard is going with their techniques. Maybe there's not a lot of activity going, but the fighter's got mission control set up and is maybe setting up an omoplata. You definitely have to understand that technique. Even though there's not a lot going on, that fighter's got an advantageous position.
over the other fighter. Yeah, circa Alan Joban, the last UFC.
Elvis.
If you want to see a fight where they're referring to exactly this, go and watch Alan Joban versus Eddie Alvarez. I think it was the second.
No, Worley Alves.
Worley Alves, my bad. Eddie Alvarez. That would be interesting. No, but that was the second round where he had mission control, I believe.
Yeah, second round was the debating point.
Yeah, he had Alan Joban had him in mission control from the bottom, and that was the deciding round of the fight. And even though there was some scraps standing up before they went down to the ground, you could still give it to Alan Joban if you understood that kind of jiu-jitsu going on the ground. So go and take a look at it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that fight yet, but I've officiated some fighters from 10th Planet that had some pretty good ground game from the back,
right,
on the ground, and have pulled off some. Actually, I've seen some go-go platas from some 10th Planet guys in amateur MMA. Actually, at one of your shows.
I was going to say Benjamin Sample,
yeah,
I think.
I was sitting there, yeah.
Exactly. And
this was even earlier. This was like one of
it was at the Avalon,
show? The Avalon shows.
Okay.
I remember, he's going for a go-go, and I saw his opponent turn the wrong way. I'm like, ooh, that's deep. And he tapped,
Yeah.
Go-go
you didn't have
plata.
to worry about judging on that one.
Yeah,
I think you were in the cage for that.
I was reffing that one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up here, we got to go pretty soon. What was your fight of the night on this main card?
Well, for me, I enjoyed, even though Barboza put on a great performance, Bobby Green versus Barboza. To me, the high-level fighting, because I know I've seen both fighters. Bobby Green's boxing is very slick. And he can get into his opponent's head with his talk and put on a show. But Edson stayed focused, determined, disciplined, fought his fight, which is leg kicks, combination punches, and pretty much had Bobby off kilter pretty much the whole night.
Right. Keeping the distance.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby likes to fight in his orthodox boxing stance, sometimes with a shoulder forward, and he uses athleticism, and he did avoid a lot of strikes, but the leg kicks, as you could see, were starting to wear on Bobby to where Bobby had to square up and fight almost like he was in a wrestling match, squared up, a combat jiu-jitsu stance almost, and really took Bobby off his game, even though he was, vocalizing that that didn't hurt, that didn't get me, You could see he was his slow breakdown to where he couldn't do where he wanted to do. He couldn't throw his combinations. The leg kicks were getting to him. Strikes that you've never seen landed on Bobby before, like that spinning back kick in the second round. Barboza's one of the fastest guys I've seen throw kicks in the cage. It's just his ability to just snap that leg like a whip and just hit his opponent's legs, and that spinning back kick to the back of the head. And even in the third round, it was a kick to the body, but just the force of it knocked Bobby down.
Right.
A roundhouse to the right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I remember them coming.
What about you, Jay?
I'm looking at my notes here, and Brad Pickett versus Chico Camus was had a lot of action back and forth.
It did.
I don't think it was. I gave it, to Chico across the board, but in terms of best fight, that really was super competitive in terms of it being just even keel, 49-51,
right,
in terms of percentages. Joe B versus Dustin Ortiz, I think he cemented, but he maintained.
You can only pick one.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. Mushmouth over here. He maintained his standing at number 2. Not sure what happens next for him, but it was a great performance. Wiman and Isaac Vallie-Flagg also very very back and forth. So you had some really competitive matches here. Edgar and Swanson, I think, really was. It was in the right place in terms of placement on the fight card. That's a match that Frankie is certainly well known for his time as a UFC lightweight champion previously. Cub Swanson's a guy that had a lot of heat behind him coming up with a pretty long win streak. And, it was those guys were coming to loggerheads, so that was the right one for this whole thing. And these are other guys as well that might have heard a little bit from. I'm speaking from perspective of casual fans. Edson Barboza, Brad Pickett, who's been around,
right?
Joe B, of course. It's a chance for them to to have a fight and further establish themselves as we close up 2014 and go into 2015 and say, what's the lay of the land of UFC fighters? Well, here's a show where we've established some of them.
Absolutely. I'm going to go with Frankie Edgar versus Cup Swanson. I think it delivered all around. I think it was entertaining. I love Frankie Edgar, not just because he's a Jersey boy, but that's part of it.
It helps.
That helps just a little bit. And Edson Barboza, of course, as well, versus Bobby Green. Super entertaining. I like the Bobby Green trash talk a little bit. Not going to lie. I'm a little Nate Diaz fan as well. So
see, that's as we were talking about last time.
It delivered.
You just got to tap into who you are. It's fun.
I'm the fan.
Add a little
I eat
flavor
the popcorn. I buy the tickets.
Yes.
It gave it to me. Jay, where can we find you on social media?
I'm still at JTAN716 across the board. I won't be here this week, so to everybody
watching the Ultimate Fighter show.
Yeah, on Wednesday. Happy Thanksgiving. Looking forward, Mom, to some home cooking. But just remember, Bobby's the one that likes the bloody chicken combs. I don't like them, so no need to make extra, okay?
Where can we find you on social media, Mike?
Facebook. I don't know what the address is.
Your Twitter is Bellion.
David Michael Bell for Facebook. Yeah, Twitter is Bellion.
Bellian.
Yeah, I'm half Armenian, so I put the IAN on it.
David Michael Bell, you just Google him. You can find him. He's a referee and a judge everywhere. Or at your local MMA show in Southern California. You can find me at Daria B28 on all social media. You can find my new Facebook page, Daria the Jersey Devil Berenato, to follow my fight career. Guys, we will see you on Wednesday for The Ultimate Fighter. Every episode is getting more entertaining, so don't miss this one. See you guys later.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later!
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.